when a hospital janitor's only truck was wrongfully seized despite every payment made, injustice rolled right up to his doorstep. Behind it stood Falcon Recovery's Rick Dalton, a man whose policies turned working people's lives into profit. But when his 8-year-old daughter, Maya, asked a convoy of bikers for help, the city's silence broke in the roar of 200 engines. And just wait until you see how that sound became the loudest act of justice Dayton had ever heard.
The morning had that brittle kind of cold that turns breath into smoke and everything else into silence. The street in Dayton, Ohio was barely awake, a row of tired houses with chipped paint and mailboxes that leaned like they'd given up arguing with time. From the Johnsons' porch, 8-year-old Maya watched a flatbed tow truck crawl toward their curb, its metal frame whining against the asphalt. At first, she thought it was lost. Then she saw the man inside, big shoulders, neon vest, a clipboard on his lap. He didn't even glance at her. The truck stopped, exhaled with a hiss of air brakes, and the man stepped out with a folded pink slip in his hand. Her father, Marcus Johnson, came running out still in his hospital scrubs, a disposable coffee cup trembling in his fingers. Hold on," he said, his voice thin with disbelief. "That's a mistake. I made the payment. I have the receipt right here." The driver barely looked at him. "You'll have to take it up with Falcon Recovery," he said, in that detached tone of someone who's done this too many times to care. He slapped the notice under the wiper and started hooking the winch to the front wheels. Maya stood behind the railing, clutching her backpack straps so tightly her fingers ached. She didn't understand every word, but she understood enough that the man was taking her dad's truck and her dad couldn't stop him. Marcus kept talking, faster now, trying reason, then pleading. "Look, I work nights at the VA. I can't get there without." "Not my problem," the driver cut in, pulling the lever. The metal cable screamed and the truck's front tires began to lift off the ground. A few curtains twitched across the street. Nobody opened their doors. Nobody said a word. The neighborhood, used to struggle, had learned to stay quiet. The sight of that silence burned more than the loss itself. Marcus turned once toward his neighbor's windows, eyes wide with something between shame and anger. The pink slip fluttered in the cold wind like a flag of defeat. Maya felt heat climb behind her eyes. She wasn't used to seeing her father small. He was the man who fixed everything, who always found a way. But now he looked like someone cornered, stripped of his dignity in front of the whole street. The tow truck's engine growled. The F-150, the truck that carried groceries, took her to school, hauled other people's furniture when they needed help, rolled away as if stolen in slow motion. The driver climbed back in, slammed the door, and shouted through the open window, "Your loan's not with us anymore. Rick Dalton at Falcon's got it now. Call him if you want your ride back." Then the truck turned the corner and vanished, leaving behind a smell of diesel and the sound of Maya's father's breathing, short and uneven. She looked up at him. "Daddy?" Marcus stared at the empty space where the truck had been, the tire tracks dark on the wet pavement. He nodded once, too slowly, as if trying to convince himself that he'd heard right. "Go get your coat, baby," he said quietly. "We'll take the bus today." Maya didn't move. She just watched the spot until the cold crept into her bones, and all she could think was how unfair it felt, that someone could show up, take something that wasn't theirs, and drive away without even looking sorry. And in that quiet morning, under the gray Ohio sky, anger, small, pure, and sharp, took root in her chest for the very first time. The day stretched long, gray, and airless. One of those days where time didn't move so much as grind. After the tow truck disappeared, Marcus Johnson stood in the kitchen with a half-cold cup of coffee, staring at his phone as if it might apologize. The paper receipt lay on the table beside the pink slip, both creased and smudged from his hands. He started dialing. The first number led to a recorded voice thanking him for his loyalty. Press 1 for billing inquiries. The second sent him to a queue that played a loop of cheerful music too loud to think through. The third ended in a voicemail promising, "Your issue has been logged, someone will respond within 5 business days." Marcus tried again and again, each call looping back into the same hollow circuit. The words blurred together: servicing, transfer, pending validation, loan reclassification. A language built to exhaust, not explain. By noon, his voice had gone hoarse from repeating his name and account number. He found the folder where he kept every document since his wife Denise had passed away. Neat, labeled, his small rebellion against chaos. There was the refinance statement, the cleared checks, the letter confirming the payment. He had done everything right. Still, the voice on the other end, this time a woman who sounded kind but weary, only sighed. "It's a hold," she said finally. "The account was transferred to Falcon Recovery after the servicing company went under. Until legal clears it, there's nothing I can do." Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, I work nights. If I can't get to the hospital, I'll lose." "I'm sorry," she interrupted gently. "I really am." And then the line went dead. By afternoon, the house had grown too quiet. Maya colored at the table, pressing her crayons harder than usual, the wax snapping under her grip. She kept glancing up at her father, hoping he'd find a solution the way he always did. But Marcus was still at the phone, shoulders hunched, the light from the small kitchen window cutting across the side of his face. When he hung up for the last time, he didn't speak. He just sat there, staring at the stack of bills, until the shadows lengthened across the counter. The silence between him and his daughter felt heavier than words could carry. At 6, the mail slot clattered. Maya jumped up to check. She came back holding an envelope with bright red ink across the top. Notice of non-payment. She handed it to him slowly, as if it might burn. Marcus unfolded it. Due to late rent. The rest blurred. He stepped outside for air. The sun had already dropped low, painting the cracked porch in amber light. The landlord's warning was already taped to the door, a yellow sheet flapping in the wind, alive in a way he wasn't sure he felt anymore. He stood there, breathing in the smell of damp concrete and oil from the missing truck spot, trying to steady his hands. He wanted to shout, to break something, but that wasn't how he was built. He'd spent years holding people's hands through pain in sterile hospital rooms. He'd learned that rage didn't fix anything. It only tired you faster. When he went back inside, Maya looked up at him with wide eyes. "Did they fix it, Daddy?" He tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "Not yet, sweetheart. We'll just have to make do for a while." She tilted her head. "How?" He crouched down to meet her eyes. "We'll ride the bus. Might even be fun." Maya nodded, trusting him the way children do, completely, instinctively. But she noticed the way his hands trembled when he reached for her backpack, and the way his eyes lingered on the empty space outside the window where the truck used to be. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Maya thought about the other time she'd seen him shake. The day he told her mom wasn't coming home. It was the same kind of silence afterward, the same hollow in his chest. And right there, under the thin blanket and the dim hallway light, Maya made herself a promise that she would not let her father face that silence alone again, no matter what it took.
Saturday arrived soft and bright, the kind of spring day that smelled faintly of engine oil and blooming lilacs. Out on Route 4, the small diner called Henderson's buzzed like a living thing. Chrome flashing, country rock spilling from a tinny speaker, laughter mingling with the rumble of engines. Every parking spot was taken, every hand held a coffee cup or a wrench. Leather vests gleamed with patches that read Lone Saints, Iron Shepherds, Faith Riders. For most people in town, the annual charity ride was just noise and spectacle, a wave of thunder rolling through and gone by afternoon. But for Maya Johnson, standing beside her father at the edge of the lot, it looked like something else entirely.
The bikes glinted in the sun, each one heavy and proud, lined up like armor. Their riders looked rough to the untrained eye, tattoos, bandanas, big hands scarred from work. But the way they greeted one another was gentle, a shoulder pat, a laugh, a nod. They weren't what TV said they were. They looked real. Maya tugged at her father's sleeve. "They help people," she whispered, her voice small but steady. Marcus, still weary from the week's endless calls and refusals, managed a faint smile. "Sweetheart, they've got their own plans today." But she wasn't listening. Something inside her, maybe that memory of him standing too still by the window, or the way his hand shook when he thought she wasn't watching, pushed her forward. She slipped from his side before he could stop her, braids swinging, sneakers tapping against the warm pavement. Marcus blinked, startled. "Maya, wait!" She didn't. She walked straight toward the row of parked motorcycles, their chrome reflecting bits of blue sky. Riders turned, curious. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. She climbed onto the low concrete curb and, for the first time in her life, raised her voice to strangers. "Excuse me!" The word cut through the air like a bell. Every head turned. She swallowed hard, then spoke again, loud and clear, her small hands clenched into fists. "My dad helps people at the hospital. He helps veterans. But somebody took his truck. They said he did pay, but he did. And now we can't get to work. I need—" Her voice trembled, then steadied. "I need someone who's not scared to talk loud." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the soft ticking of cooling engines. The crowd shifted, uneasy, touched. Then a tall man stepped out from behind a Harley painted flat black. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes the color of worn denim. His patch read Wyatt, Hammer, Collins. He crouched a little so he wasn't towering over her. He asked gently, "You said Falcon Recovery?" Marcus finally caught up, breathless, holding out the crumpled receipt and the warning notice. "It's all there," he said, voice low. "They won't even talk to me." Hammer took the papers, scanned them, jaw tightening. "Dalton again," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He straightened and looked over his shoulder. "Gearbox!" A woman in her 40s with a long dark braid and grease on her knuckles came over, phone already in hand. Her patch read, "Denise Gearbox Morales." "Check this," Hammer said, handing her the slip. Gearbox frowned, thumb flying across the screen. "If the servicing got sold without written notice, that hold code's illegal," she said. "My sister's a paralegal. She's seen this scam before." She started sending photos of the documents. "Give me 5 minutes." Another man, clean cut under his riding jacket, stepped up. His name patch read Leonard Rev Brooks, a nickname that made sense when he spoke. "You work at the VA?" he asked Marcus. "Custodio night shift," Marcus said quietly. "I just try to keep the place running." Rev nodded slowly. "Then we'll keep you running." Around them, riders began to gather, curiosity turning into quiet purpose. Someone offered Maya a bottle of water. Someone else reached down to tighten the bungee cord on her father's backpack, wordlessly respectful. When Gearbox looked up again, her face had changed. "Got confirmation," she said. "The file was misflagged. Falcon can't legally hold that truck. They'll try, though." Hammer's hand closed into a fist. "Not if we can help it." He turned to Maya, his voice steady, not loud, but strong enough to carry. "You asked the right way, kid, straight and honest." He faced the line of bikes and raised 2 fingers in the air. "All right, people, heads up. We roll respectful, we roll legal, and we roll together." Engines began to stir, one by one, a low, rising heartbeat that seemed to fill the sky. Maya looked up at her father, eyes shining with something new, belief. For the first time all week, Marcus didn't try to hide his smile. He just whispered, half to her, half to himself, "Maybe loud's exactly what we needed." The Falcon Recovery Yard sat on the far end of an industrial strip, a maze of warehouses and rusted fences that all looked the same under the washed-out sky. The chain-link gate rattled in the wind. Beyond it, rows of impounded vehicles stood like prisoners under the hum of security lights. At noon, the air began to change. It started as a distant vibration, low, steady, almost felt more than heard. The pigeons scattered from the power lines. The hum deepened, multiplied, and then rolled like thunder down the narrow road. By the time the first engines turned the corner, the manager on duty, a man in a collared shirt with Falcon stitched above the pocket, had already pulled down the blinds. He watched through a sliver in the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a quick whisper. Yeah, they're here. A lot of them. One by one, the riders arrived, forming a line that wrapped the block. 200 bikes gleaming like armor under the pale sun. They didn't roar or rev in defiance. They simply existed, engines idling in perfect rhythm, their sound steady as a pulse you could lean against. Hammer was the first to dismount. His boots hit the asphalt with purpose. All right, he said to his riders, calm but firm. Traffic stays open. Keep the fire lane clear. No one touches the fence unless asked. Half of them peeled off smoothly to direct cars and waved through trucks trying to pass. They moved like a living organism, efficient, coordinated, respectful. On the sidewalk, Gearbox Morales stood beside Marcus Johnson, phone in hand, live stream already running. Her voice was steady, her eyes sharp. We're here because paperwork got buried, because a man who served this community was told his payment didn't count. Here's the stamped receipt. She held it up to the camera. Here's the law they ignored. Within minutes, the comments started climbing. Nurses, veterans, neighbors, people who knew Marcus. Mr. Johnson fixed my dad's wheelchair for free. He stayed late to help clean after the storm. He never asked for anything. The story spread faster than anyone could have planned. Sirens approached in the distance. Not fast, not urgent, just present. When the police arrived, the rider stepped aside. Hammer gestured toward Rev Brooks, who walked forward, calm and confident in his leather jacket. The sergeant who stepped out of the cruiser paused, eyes flicking to the patch on Rev's chest, Faith Riders. We're here so the paperwork gets read, Rev said, voice low, respectful. He tapped a small badge-shaped pin on his vest, a cross framed in brass. Nobody's blocking business, nobody's trespassing. We just want what's right seen. The sergeant nodded once. Then let's see it. Inside the office, the tension thickened. The manager whispered into the phone again, sweat beating at his temple. They've got cameras, he hissed. They're live streaming this. On the other end, Falcon's headquarters buzzed into motion. Someone started checking the account file, another pulled transaction history. For the first time in weeks, Marcus's name wasn't a number in a queue. It was a situation. Then, a voice from inside the office, young, uncertain, broke the silence. Sir, you might want to see this. A junior clerk turned his monitor toward the manager. On the screen was a line item dated 3 days after Marcus's payment cleared. A transfer of servicing that hadn't been processed yet when the system flagged the account. The so-called hold wasn't legal. It was an administrative shortcut that conveniently turned delays into profit. The manager muttered, "It's a glitch. We'll fix it Monday." But the sergeant had already received a message on his phone. The code section Gearbox had texted him minutes earlier. He looked up, voice even but firm. "No, sir. Under Ohio law, if the debt's satisfied, the vehicle must be released immediately." The word immediately hung in the air like a gavel strike. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the manager sighed, picked up a ring of keys, and motioned toward the yard gate. Fine, but this isn't how we do business. Rev's eyes met his. Maybe it should be. The gate rolled open with a groan, metal grinding against metal. Beyond it, Marcus's old F-150 stood between two SUVs, dust-covered but proud. The sunlight broke through the clouds just as the truck eased forward. The chrome strip across its hood catching fire in the light. Hammer walked up to Maya, who stood next to her father, wide-eyed and trembling from the noise in the crowd. He knelt, holding the keys out in his grease-stained hand. "You brought the right kind of help, kid," he said with a smile. "You give these back where they belong." Maya took 'em carefully, both hands trembling, and turned to her dad. "Here, Daddy." Marcus knelt to her level, his eyes wet but steady. "Thank you, baby girl." He took the keys, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, forehead resting against it, the sound of 200 engines surrounding him like a heartbeat of the city itself. Then he turned the key. The F-150 came alive, humming steady and true, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Hammer raised his hand. The riders responded in unison, one powerful rolling wave of engine revs that filled 3 city blocks. It wasn't anger, it wasn't threat, it was affirmation, a collective vow that good people would not stand alone again. Windows opened, workers from nearby shops stepped outside. Someone began clapping, then another and another. Marcus lifted his head, eyes closed, and exhaled everything he'd been holding since the day the truck left his driveway. The fear, the shame, the helplessness. It all went with that breath. And for the first time in a long time, the sound that filled the air wasn't the noise of loss. It was the sound of justice, loud enough to be heard.
By the time Rick Dalton arrived, the roar had faded into a hum. The engines were off now, but their power still clung to the air like heat after a storm. He stepped out of his silver sedan in a crisp shirt and polished shoes, the kind of outfit that made him look like he expected to win every argument before it began. He scanned the scene, the line of bikes, the police cars, the open gate, the phone cameras still recording. His confident stride slowed. "I'm sure there's a misunderstanding," he began, voice smooth as glass. "Falcon Recovery operates under policy and compliance. If there's been any procedural—" He stopped mid-sentence. On the other side of the fence, Gearbox Morales held her phone aloft, the live counter on her stream ticking past 10,000 viewers. Beside her, the sergeant was taking written statements. And behind them all, 200 riders stood in quiet formation, not angry, not threatening, simply present. Dalton's smile thinned. He tugged at his collar, the rhythm of his words faltering. We'll audit this case," he said finally. "We'll make it right." And for once, he did. By Monday morning, Falcon Recovery had reversed the charges, voided every fee, and sent a written apology to Marcus Johnson, signed, notarized, and public. The local bank that had sold the debt without notice received a compliance penalty. The story, now clipped and shared across social media, reached beyond Dayton. A 3-minute video of a little girl standing on a curb asking for help from someone not scared to talk loud. The landlord, who'd seen the stream and spotted familiar faces in the comments, nurses, veterans, even one of his own cousins, quietly taped a new letter to Marcus's door. This one said, "Rent extension approved." No fees, no warning, just silence and space to breathe. A week later, Henderson's Diner threw open its doors for a thank you cookout. The smell of grilled burgers and sweet corn drifted over the parking lot where it had all begun. The bikers came early, polishing chrome, setting up tables. Veterans from the hospital brought folding chairs. Nurses showed up still in scrubs, name tags half tucked into their pockets. Someone brought Maya a small helmet, silver with glittering stars brushed across the top, and presented it to her like a crown. She beamed so hard it felt like daylight. Hammer Collins leaned against the side of Marcus's newly returned truck, a paper plate in hand, watching the crowd laugh and mingle. When Marcus joined him, Hammer nodded toward the grill smoke curling into the sky. 3 years ago, he said, a nurse sat with my old man his whole last night, never left, didn't even know him. Said nobody should have to go alone like that. Marcus's eyes softened. That must have been tough. Hammer looked at him. Yeah, that nurse's name was Denise Johnson. Marcus froze, breath catching. Hammer smiled faintly. I didn't forget, brother. Some debts you don't pay back, you just pay forward. For a long moment, the two men stood in silence, no speeches, no grand gestures, just a quiet understanding that the world still had good balance somewhere in it.
When the sun dipped low, Gearbox offered Maya a slow lap around the block on her bike. Maya climbed on behind her, clutching tight around her waist. The engine purred to life, smooth and strong. As they rode past the diner, people waved from porches and sidewalks. A little boy held up a hand-painted cardboard sign, "Be like Maya." She laughed into the wind, her voice small but bright against the roar of the bike. For the first time, the world didn't feel big and scary. It felt possible. When they circled back, Marcus lifted her off the bike, setting her down carefully on the pavement. Around them, the crowd gathered, rough hands, kind eyes, a patchwork of strangers who had become a wall of protection and pride. He looked around, his voice low but full. "You showed my kids something I couldn't teach her alone," he said. "How to stand up without pushing anyone down. That's the kind of noise this street needed." Hammer nodded. Rev clasped his shoulder. Someone started a slow clap that turned into a cheer. And if you drive down Route 4 on a Saturday morning now, you can still feel it, a vibration under the concrete, a rhythm that belongs to something larger than steel and gas. It's in the way the engines rumble when they start their charity rides. It's in the way neighbors wave when the convoy passes. People say you can't hear courage, but that day, 200 engines proved you can. Because once, a little black girl stood on a curb with her whole heart in her voice, and an entire city answered.